Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately termed IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association that is all focused on implementing the child's right to play everywhere. And so I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA USA, and you can find all 225 plus Porch Play Chats by going to our website at ipausa.org. And up in that top right-hand corner, you'll friend us, follow us, or subscribe to us on our Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram channel. And magically, every Monday morning, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. So with me on the porch today is Karen Nemeth. Is that right?
That's right. Thank you.
Yay! Karen is joining. Karen, we're so glad you're here. Karen is an author, presenter, and advocate focused on working with young children's multilingual learners. Oh, you're going to help me answer those questions I had for Stacy. She's published more than a dozen books on this topic and hosts a resource website at www.languagecastle.com. She recently retired to have more time to teach outdoor play and learning classes. Where have you been all my life? For families of young children and to work directly with teachers. And today she's going to talk about supporting play for children with diverse languages, which, oh my goodness. So if play is play, does it really make a difference if children don't speak your language or the language of their peers? That's my question to you.
That is the most important question, because I'll tell you who it makes a difference to. It makes a difference to those children. And, the time is now to really start thinking about what our invitations to play are like for each individual child, and how they come across, how it connects to their previous experiences, and how we can make them feel more welcome, bring them in, celebrate their creativity, their learning. But it really depends on understanding how we connect with each child and how our materials connect with each child, so that we can make sure every child who speaks different languages gets as much out of play as they could possibly want. And
Oh, that's beautiful.
so I thought of this example from a number of years ago. A friend of mine has lived and worked in this country for a long time, but he was finally bringing his parents over from Africa for the first time to visit. Normally, he would go and visit them. So he brings his parents over, and it's a long journey to get to the airport in their country, and then multiple stops. They finally land in the United States, and the first thing they want to do is go someplace and get supply, something that they can eat, that they can feel familiar with. And they went to a grocery store, and they bought bread. Okay. What they thought was bread, right? Because it had a picture on the box that was a picture of bread. And it was a mix. And they open it up. They're hungry. Maybe it's almost midnight. They had all this, and they open it up, and inside it's just powder, right?
Just powder to make bread.
So that always sort of represents for me what it's like when we, as English speaking adults, present play opportunities. We think we know what we're providing, but that doesn't mean that each child understands what we're providing in the same way. It seems obvious to us that we're putting out a box of bread mix, but it's not always obvious to that child. So how can we think about connecting with what will make sense to that child to invite them in to the play? So I have some thoughts about that, but I'll bet you have questions for me.
Oh, no. So I think that's absolutely fabulous. And I think teachers in classrooms, since we have a diverse population, number one, don't understand that children learn two languages a little slower, right? Because they're learning two, right?
No, that's not quite right.
Oh, good.
I'm really meticulous about saying this.
This is
It,
good.
right. It is that they are not learning language slower. They generally learn language and how language works
Mhm,
on par with their peers. They
mhm,
may have slightly fewer words in each
mhm.
language, but their total words altogether in both languages, if you add them up, match what's happening with their peers. So it's
Oh,
not really
perfect.
slow. It just looks slow. But this is, once again, Deborah, this is a difference in our adult responsibility to understand, right? That it's not that the child's not slow on language, a child's not slow on words. I'm slow because I, as an adult, don't recognize the words in their home language, that they're all over the place. And
That's a
I,
beautiful
right.
explanation. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me because I always tell students who want to push English all the
Yes.
time, I'm like, listen, that's not the way to help them learn English.
Right.
So if we could talk about those kinds of strategies that are not, you know, look, watch how I say this word sort of thing. Oh my goodness. What
Right.
are some authentic ways that we can help them?
Well, we do know from the research and also from practice of some really specific, but in also enjoyable
Mm,
relationship-based ways to get started. So one of the most important things is to start with including familiar items that are
mhm,
familiar to that child, not like that you look up on the internet, children from this country always play with X. Well, you don't
mhm,
know if that applies to this particular child, right? But by observing the child and what they gravitate toward in the environment. Do they always go for the blocks? Then, you might bring in more block activities or sit with that child in the block area. If you ask the families, for example, oh, this is a secret. I actually stole this from a teacher in one of my workshops, Deb, so
oh, tell
don't
me.
report me. But the teacher said she sent a message home to the families in their home languages and asked them to send in photo of what the child had for a meal that day. And then she printed those photos out and made them into a class book. Not like, the plastic food from the multicultural catalog, but the actual photos of that child's meal, right? And then another teacher in that workshop said, well, then if you had those pictures, couldn't you cut them out and laminate them and use those real pictures of the real food in the dramatic play area so that then the whole now you can see, like, how did that change from I bought things you might like
Mhm,
to I've investigated you and I learned what you
mhm,
like and I have now made this part of my environment. Anytime you provide something that's familiar to a young child, they're more likely to have vocabulary about it and experience about it. They are more likely to think in words when they see those familiar things, and they have a
mhm,
better sort of menu of resources in their brains to talk about or to try to communicate about familiar items. So if we start with the familiar, then you can
mhm.
build to the new. So
Based on prior knowledge. Gee, what a
that's it. That's the
surprise.
whole thing. Exactly right. Like we've been saying that some for a long time. Some of us, have been saying it longer than others. But I will tell you, my mom was a preschool teacher her whole career. And she was a very play-based preschool teacher. So I grew up with
Mm,
that, make your own Play-Doh with your own hands and bring things in from nature to create things. And so this is so sort of deep for me, but it's not really new. And and it's like we have to recapture. But also I'm saying back in the 50s, my mom was saying, we've got to connect with prior knowledge.
mhm.
And here
And
we are still.
that amazing that, the old needs to be new again? Because,
That's
back
right.
in the 50s, what preschool and kindergarten looked like is totally different
Yes,
than what preschool and kindergarten looks like today.
that's right. That's right. So,
And so that's a beautiful strategy to help children who don't have English as their first language.
Right.
And I think the other big piece is we have to respect that home language and encourage families to continue to
Yes.
speak that home language at home. I know
Yes.
that it, and then, they can learn English at school, but please keep the home language, right? So
Right.
that they're able to speak to their elders and have that family wonderful relationship. Eh, but I think sometimes people feel so much pressure to catch them up
Yes.
that they do things that are harmful to both languages, right? They're not.
Yes.
But can you talk more about that for us?
Yes. And you're just hitting on several really important points. So, yes, maintaining that home language at home is so important for the relationships. But
Mhm,
in addition and meshed with that is that families have their own biggest vocabulary, their most expression, their most, rich, wonderful communications happen in their home language. We
mhm.
don't want children to be deprived of that learning, right? And that learning of all kinds of wonderful words and communications and play and traditions forms the foundation that makes it easier and stronger when children learn English. And
Yes,
so
and the
research,
cultural values and beliefs that are
all of it.
shared, you don't want them to lose the identity.
All of that is true. And the trick is that in embedded in learning about those traditions and communicating with your family is language and learning, language and learning, language and learning all the way. So we talk about cultural knowledge as if it's somehow separate.
Mhm,
It's really center to all these big words that we learn. Like when a child, is out gardening with their grandfather, all the many things they learn about how things grow and how things feel and the science and the counting and all that happens. It seems like, oh, well, isn't that nice to support that cultural exchange? But it's so much learning as well. So we want to
mhm.
encourage the families because they provide this rich body of knowledge and language and expression in their home language. And that foundation is actually what makes learning English more effective
Yeah.
and stronger. The more children know, the more language they can attach to it. That's their prior knowledge that you just talked about. So,
All goes back to that prior knowledge.
yeah. So, one of the things I like to suggest is that it would be great for schools to make videos of their really best classroom practices. Things like how do you read a story aloud and make it into a playful experience with young children. Not
Mhm,
every family knows that. You can't send that home in a newsletter because not everybody's going to read that. But if you make a video of how reading aloud and interacting and funny voices, and you send that home to the families, they can learn by observing the video and do it in their home language. Or if you send home a video of classroom activities. So, say, for example, you are going to put out some writing and drawing materials like pieces of white paper and crayons and pencils and scissors. Take a video to
mhm,
show families all the many different things that can happen with those materials so that
mhm.
when they see the video, they can talk to their child about the video in their home language. They can explain to the child, oh, I see in your classroom there is,
Paper and crayons
papeles
and scissors.
blancos or something like that. And then the child uh, can sort of make that connection like, oh, I talked to my family about this. Now, when I see it in the classroom, I have a better understanding because I think that's one of the things that our multilingual learners miss out on and teachers don't always realize. They think,
Mhm,
well, if I put out these open-ended materials, anybody can do what they want. But a lot of that moment is the teacher explaining, hey, you can draw what you want. Here are crayons. Let's talk about the colors. What you're free to choose other materials. If you want to use scissors, just ask me. Well, if the teacher said all that, some kids got a whole wonderful introduction and other
mhm.
kids didn't understand a word you said
Word
and
she
they don't know
said.
what am I supposed to do? What do you if a teacher says to a diverse group of children, if you want scissors, just let me know. Some children will be left out of that choice. They won't have that option to make that choice because they didn't understand what she said. So if we
Ooh.
send the video home of those materials and kids using them, teachers using them, and the parents can talk with the children about it, then that child comes in the next day, they're like, oh, I get it. I can scribble all over this paper and not get in trouble. I get it. I can use different materials together with this paper if I want. But I think teachers hear themselves explaining things and they think it's like so obvious and they've explained it. But if you put yourself in the shoes of a child who doesn't understand your language, you realize you
No
you
idea. I
didn't
have no
get through
idea
to
what you
them.
want me to do with this, right?
That exactly
And
right.
maybe they come from a previous environment where they were told what to do and how to do
Yes,
it, right? Instead of it
absolutely.
being this beautiful open-ended experience.
Or also many families in other countries had their own school experiences that way. That's what they communicate to their children. When I grew up, you did what the teacher said. When you go to school, I expect you to do what the teacher says. But
Mhm.
when you send that video home, you're opening that invitation, not just to the child, but to the whole family to rethink how preschool can be that wonderful, creative, playful space.
Oh, I just love those ideas. One of the other things I'm wondering is if you have multilingual children in your classroom and you have children who are English speakers,
Yeah.
how can we utilize Vygotsky's work in helping children begin to communicate, even if it's non-verbally, with another child and be able to see what the environment has to offer and how other children are using those materials? Is there some strategies that you can give around that too, so that if people say, okay, I can make a video and send that home to families that says, here, and maybe there's someone in my school that speaks that family's home
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Well, that'd
That's a
be
good one.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and and so it'll be explained to them in their home language, and then they can help their child understand and maybe offer those opportunities at home. How can we use Vygotsky with learning from their peers to incorporate more meaning for them?
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because those peer interactions are just treasures of learning when
Mhm.
the children can interact, right? When you create an environment that's filled with high quality, open-ended, discoverable materials, the teacher can step back and just relax, knowing that so much learning and language will happen.
Mhm.
But the glitch is if the children don't speak the same language, they don't get the same chatter as their friends do. And that chatter is like rich, important learning content and vocabulary. So, how
Mhm.
we can help that? Actually, there are studies that have shown. I actually wrote this into a children's book called called "New Words, New Friends." That
Ooh.
because there was this cluster of research. It showed 3 strategies that we can teach to young children that can change their behavior so that they can interact more effectively with their peers and that speak different languages or different language levels. So the first strategy is to teach children to speak slowly and clearly because their friend may not understand everything they say.
Mhm.
And the second strategy is point, act, or show, demonstrate for your friend, use your gestures so they can understand what you want. And the third strategy is wait patiently. It takes your
Mhm.
friend longer to process, to understand what you said and think about how to say it back to you in your language. So speak slowly and clearly, use gestures, and be patient are all things that a 3-year-old can learn and a 4-year-old can learn, but they just don't know it yet. And if
Mhm.
we teach them, like you can imagine so many situations where that would help you interact with a 2-year-old, that would help you interact with somebody with a hearing impairment. And it helps the Korean child speak, understand how to play with the American child, helps the American child learn to play with children from other countries. Everyone can benefit from those three strategies.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And so if we were to support families in speaking, I just, you hear the stories of when people were immigrating to the United States from other countries, they said, no, you will only speak English, right?
Right.
Um, and so I still think that is a prevalent, even when I was directing an early care and education program, I had a family that actually had three languages.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
And so mom spoke this language, dad spoke this language, and then they both were learning English.
Yeah.
And so, and I said, what we want to preserve the home languages,
Right.
right?
Both
And
of them. Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
And so they said, but they need to learn English. And I said, that's
They
okay,
do.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you kept the home languages going, then they can learn English here. And that way, because sometimes what I found is, and I still find that when people who have a different home language than English
Yeah.
try to speak English to their children,
Right.
sometimes the words aren't clear and the pronunciation isn't as accurate as it could be. And so their children don't learn the correct pronunciation of
Well, I
words.
will say that may be true, but it's not as big a problem as people once thought. We actually do have studies about that now, that it's
Right.
pretty, and I'll tell you how you can connect this with another thing that we've been thinking about for a long time with young children. You know how they go through that generalization phase when they figure out that, you put an S on the word to make it a plural, and pretty soon they're saying, mooses and feets and, all that. And you think, oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. They don't go to college talking like that.
No.
So if children do learn some kind of quirky pronunciations, it's very quickly can be, it doesn't have, you don't have to correct it. Very
Right.
quickly as they grow in experience and hearing how things are said, that will be okay. The thing you really miss when families try to do too much of English and they don't know all the words, so they don't have the content to express, that's when the child really loses. And so that's more of a concern. Like if you talk in your home language, you can say a lot more and they learn a lot more. And one of the things that the researchers are really intent on right now is really making sure that teachers understand it is content, it's background knowledge, it's the information that children learn that fuels language development. The more they know, the more language they can learn in any language. But if you
Mhm.
focus on teaching the words of English, you are
Mhm.
sacrificing the content. You're sacrificing the experiences, and they know less in their brain. And so it's harder to progress in English. So when you support the home language also in preschool or early school years, when you also bring in the home language in terms of books, volunteers, peer interactions, that children, the more children comprehend, the more knowledge they develop, the more their words can attach to that knowledge and they can progress better in English. So in the preschool years, we actually say too much English hurts their English development because they're struggling to understand the vocabulary words you're using. They are missing out on the deeper, more complex foundational knowledge that they should be getting from play.
Wow. Oh, I love that. And that, again, that's that catching them up thing that we always are trying to do. Catch them up,
Right.
catch them up. And then we erase play because we're too busy directing, right?
Yes, yes.
Directing that language development that could
Yes.
emerge authentically if children
Yes.
were able to just.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Karen, this is amazing.
So yeah, I think
Anything else that you would suggest to a family or a teacher that
Yes.
might be listening to this that could support their language development regardless of the language they speak?
Yes, I have two sort of quick ones for you. One of them is that that a teacher can learn a few basic open-ended questions and say them in the child's home language. Right? Teachers sometimes they have 6, 8 languages and they can't learn pages and pages of every language. But you could learn to say, "What are you making?"
Mhm,
or "Tell me about this."
mhm,
in the home language of each child. And
mhm.
then I'll encourage that child to use their oral language to feel empowered to talk about their work and having that back and forth conversation is so rich and powerful. But because one of the things our multilingual learners miss out on is they don't have as much time for conversation. Teachers don't understand them. They don't understand the teachers. They don't understand each other's questions. So they're
Mhm.
missing out on that oral language and that social interaction. But if teachers can start using open-ended, just a couple open-ended questions, encourage the child to talk back and tell about their story in any language, or mixing up the languages is fine
Mixing them
too.
up, that's
That
normal, yeah.
that can really, that's one thing that can make a huge difference in the home language. And the second one is really focus on words that children will use. So
Mm,
if you're going to either bring in home language words or bring in supports to help children learn the English, it can't all be labels of things. Like we
oh,
got in this habit in
okay.
education about like, oh, I taught the children all the colors. And then you want to say, so what? How many interesting conversations are they going to have about colors? They want to talk about how the blocks will crash and collapse, and how the ball will go through the hoop or whatever. Children need verbs and modifiers as
Mhm.
well as nouns. So when we're supporting language, either in their home language or in English, all of the forms of language so that they can use the language to think and communicate and not just memorize.
I love it. So one of the classrooms I would visit was a young, like 2 to 3 year old classroom of multilingual
Yeah.
learners.
Wow. Yeah.
And the teacher said, I have 4 languages in
That's a
addition to
lot.
English in this classroom. And so I asked the parents what what words the child would use when they had to go to the bathroom, or when they were hungry, or when they were thirsty.
Yes.
And so she truly had chart paper up around the room with all 4 languages and the words that the children were used phonetically spelled for her.
From the family.
Yes, from the family.
Yeah.
And then she would, so when when the child who spoke Spanish would say something with house in it, mi casa, my house, then she would say, oh, your house.
Yeah.
You're talking about your house. And and she would say, mi casa, your house, or my house.
Yes.
And so she would just reinforce those
The connections.
connections
Yeah.
with the child. And that's how she worked with 2 to 3 year olds in
Well, I'll tell you two secrets. Don't tell anybody. Don't reveal this in any recordings or anything.
anyone, right?
Okay. But two
Secret.
secrets to that strategy are first of all, when you specifically and explicitly make those word connections for children in the authentic time, like they're playing in the house area and they say Mikasa and you connect it with house, or they ask to go to the bathroom and you connect that word they're using for bathroom. That
Mhm.
that then it's an authentic learning of words, not a memorized learning. And in the moment when I'm using it, connection is much stronger in the brain. So that's one. The second thing is that's so empowering for the families. Now it
Mhm.
becomes a partnership. It's not just the teacher has the power and the parents do whatever the teacher says. It's that we need each other. You have knowledge about your child that's going to help me do my job, and I'm observing things about your child that can help you at home, and we are equal partners. And how wonderful that is for families, and how it helps them really connect and feel the power of their involvement in their child's education, which we know results in much greater success, right?
See there? See there? See those wonderful. So Karen has given you tons of strategies that you can use in the classroom. So you might need to listen to this one 3 or 4 times in order to be able to grasp all of those different concepts. But try one, just try one.
One at a
And when
time.
that one works and you're feeling really comfortable, then try another one.
Yeah.
Karen, hang on while I close this out. That was absolutely incredible. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.